Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and in this video, I'm going to teach you how to add beads to a centerline cuff. So this here is a centerline cuff. You can see that it's already constructed. It's really nice and it's very solid, but you can adjust it if you want to. You can just squeeze it in a little bit. And if you'll notice something really special about this, it is this nice cutout inset and all these little holes. And what you're able to do is you're actually able to weave in beads into that center part using those holes as your anchor point. So I've done a couple examples already, and this is actually the same pattern, just done in a different colorway. And what these are these are little Miyuki 11 Delicas, and that's what this is made for. So the holes are spaced appropriately for the size 11 Delicas. You can do a pattern that is 7 beads tall by 23 beads long. And what's nice about that is you can do wonderful diamond and chevron patterns because you do have a midway point on both directions. Now there's also these little rings as well. Now these are centerline rings, and they are 11 beads long by 3 beads tall. And so you can see that you can create your patterns there too. One thing I love about this is, of course, your beads are the focal, but your thread choice also comes into play. And you can color coordinate your thread. You can use a contrasting thread, whichever you like. So what you're going to need for this particular project is you're going to need a centerline cuff or a centerline ring, your beads, whichever ones you want. Again, we're going to be using the Miyuki Delica 11Os. You're going to be using a big eye needle. If you're not familiar with what that is it is essentially a needle with a really big eye that lets you put a little thicker thread through it. We're going to be using NYMO, and what's great is NYMO comes in a ton of beautiful colors, so you can really match it to your beads. I also have this thread here on my table. This is silk thread, 100% pure silk, size F, and this is a big spool. You get 140 yards. We have quite a few colors on Beadaholique.com available, and this works beautifully as well. So this example here, I used the silk thread from the spool. And on this example here, I used the NYMO method. You're also going to need a pair of scissors, a little bit of GS Hypo cement. You're going to want a Post-it pad for your cement. And for me, sometimes I have to open up the lid with a little pair of chain nose. So that's why the chain nose are here. And then a pattern. Now, if you look at the way the beads are lined up, it's identical to how they are lined up for a loom pattern. So if you're familiar with making loom patterns, it's the exact same process. And so I just essentially made myself a little loom pattern that was 7 beads tall by 23 long. So let's go ahead and begin. We're going to be using this color palette I came up with, kind of a spring garden color palette. We've got little white beads, green, and purple. I will say from doing some experimenting, you definitely want to create as much contrast as you can with your beads if you want to be able to see all the details of your pattern, just because you're not working with a lot of space, and so it helps if your beads are high contrast. Let's look at the cuff itself. So it looks like at first glance there are 2 identical rows of all these little holes, and actually they are a little bit different. So the top row, if you look at it, they're all evenly spaced until you get right here, and you notice that there's a bigger gap between the last hole and the next to last one. And then if you look at this side, they're all evenly spaced the entire length. So this is going to tell you where you start. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut 2 lengths of NYMO. So we're basically doubling the thickness of the NYMO that we're using. So I've got 2 lengths that are 40 inches long each, and I just pre-cut it. You're going to line up the ends and put them through the big eye needle. If you're using the 100% pure silk, the one on the spool, you're not going to need to double it. This is thick enough. You see it's actually even a little thicker. So it just depends. If you want it to be a little bit thicker, I'd go ahead and I'd use the silk. If you want it to be a little thinner, I'd use the NYMO. Make sure you do double the NYMO and don't do a single strand. The doubling creates extra thickness within your beads and keeps them from scooting around too much. So that's really an important thing to remember. So where that gap is, you're actually going to go diagonally across the bracelet to the far corner hole. So you're not starting here. This is actually going to be your end point, but by seeing where it is, you can tell where you need to start. Go diagonal across, and we're going to take our needle and go from the back to the front. And we have not tied a knot on our thread, and we're not going to. That's something we're going to do in the finishing process. So you're going to pull it and pull it until you have a tail, or I should say tails, of about 8 inches. Now I'm going to follow my little pattern right here. I'm going to pick up a green bead, 2 purples, a white, then 2 more purples, and a green. So I've got those all on my needle. So again, this does feel very much like loom work. Just going to pull them down. And I'm going to go from the back. So I'm going to put my needle through that center and come up through to the front, going from the back to the front. Let those guys sit in that little well. And now I'm going to run my needle back through them. And pull them into place. So I'm just going to position them. Tug on my thread a little bit. And now I'm going to take my needle down through the center of the cuff again. And I want to go up through that same hole I started with. I'm not ready to jump over to another row yet. Okay, and pull tight. And now we're going to go back through our beads again. And again, take our needle through the center to the back. And now we're ready to go over to the next row. And just tug on your ends. Make sure that first row is nice and tight. And now we're going from the back to the front. And this is going to be our second row. So we're going to look at our pattern. Pick up 2 green, 3 purple, and 2 more green. And you can probably already tell that we're really not going to use very many beads at all. This is a great project if you just have little its and bits left in tubes that you've been wanting to use. This is perfect for that because you don't need a lot of beads. Okay, so go through that center of the cuff again. And then from the back to the front, through the next hole over. And now go back through your beads. And pull. And it was only on that first one that we did that extra pass, so we are ready to jump over to our next row. So we're just going to feed that needle through that center and go over to the next hole. Okay, and come out the front and pick up our next row. So here we're going to do 1 white, 2 greens, a purple, 2 more greens, and another white. Okay. Slide those guys down. And again, through the middle of your cuff. So you're going from the back to the front. And then up through your beads again. And pull. Okay, and now we're ready to go over to the next row. So you're just going to keep doing this until you have done each and every row. Again, that'll be 23. And then I will show you how to tie it off and then go back and secure your beginning threads as well. So you see what we've got here? See that pattern starting to develop? And you're just going to continue on with that exact same method until you get all the way over here. I finished my beadwork with the exception of the last row, and I wanted to just show you that I stepped over to that hole that has a little extra gap between it, just the same as all the other ones. Nothing changed in my technique. And now I'm ready to do my last row. So I'll pick up one green, 2 purples, a white, 2 more purples, and a green. And I'm just going to do this same as all the other ones. So I'm going to go inside, and you can see that little area has gotten a lot smaller since it's all been filled with the beadwork. So I'm going to go up from the back now and go up through all my beads again. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm pulling this one nice and tight. And I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go to the back, like so. And now I'm going to flip this around. So I'm now looking at the underside. And we've got all these wonderful threads along the back here. And we're going to use one of those to help us tie a little knot. So I'm going to just take my needle and go under one of the little thread bridges. Make a little loop and go through the loop. I'm just making a little knot. Now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go down through the next bead sequence over. And we're going to put some glue on that knot here at the end. So if you just have a nice little simple knot, it's okay. Okay, because what we want is we want this to be comfortable when we wear it. If we made a big, huge knot right there, it would rub on our wrist, or especially if we're doing a ring, it would really rub. So we want to keep that knot small. So that side, with the exception of the glue, is now done. I'm going to pull this off of my big eye needle. Or in this case, maybe I'll just trim it off. It seems to have gotten a little stuck there. There we go. Okay, so we're going to leave that as is until we add the glue and the glue dries. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're going to put these other 2 lengths of NYMO back on it, and that's why you left a tail that was long enough to be able to rethread onto a needle. And we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to find the little thread bridge that's one over, or the one that's the same one, as long as the beads are tight enough. Just a nearby thread bridge. Make that little loop and go through it with your needle. Pull, and then go over to the beads next to it and run your needle and thread down. And pull. And we are done with that side now. So now we're going to add our glue. So we're going to use GS Hypo Cement. And sometimes I have a hard time getting this lid off. So a little tip is to use your chain nose and just loosen it. There we go. And you can see this is a very well-loved container of GS Hypo. And we just want a little bit of glue. So I like to go like this, because I know once I open my GS, it starts to come on out. So I'm just going to make sure there's just a little bit on my tip, and I'm going to put it right on my glue knot. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And we are done. Now we're just going to trim our tails. So I would let your glue dry. But in this case, I want to show you the finished piece. So I'm going to go ahead and do it right now. So I'm just going to take my scissors right where those threads exit, cut on both sides, and we have a finished centerline cuff. And your technique would be identical on the ring, and you can see the ring hole spacing is the same, where you have one row with a little extra gap between the second to last hole and the last hole. So again, you would just start diagonally across at that corner there. So again, these are centerline cuffs. They come in a couple different finishes, and we also have the little rings, and they're really fun to do. And I love it that you can use up some of your old leftover beads if you want to. Sometimes you've collected really pretty colors and you're down to just a handful. This is a great use for them. So if you like this video, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our hundreds and hundreds of other videos as well. Thanks for watching.